Hello and welcome to another episode of Throttle Stop Garage. In today's episode, we're going to get transmission tunnel. We're back on it. The tunnel is it was in, as you saw in, was that episode 28? So this will be episode 29. And we now need to get the tunnel built towards the back of the car. So we have to join the two pieces together. Now, because of drive shaft angles and other things, that didn't all work out, right? It doesn't always work out in this particular effort of engineering. And despite all of the best intentions, it isn't going to be able to fit. The engine isn't as low as the stock engine because of the steering rack, right? We've got issues here, there, everywhere, so you have to engineer around all of it. And the net result of that is, versus a stock setup, this engine is at the tail shaft up about 1.5 inches. So really, it's not that big a deal. But it does add an extra couple of degrees. So I wasn't able to make a two-part drive shaft work very effectively. Everything meant that all of the various angles were going to be right at the edge of what you can actually run drive lines at. So I was a bit concerned about that. So we didn't worry too much about those things, and we went. We'll be ordering a one-piece drive shaft with a CV joint at the end of it. The engine sits at a position that is going to actually make that okay. It's going to be expensive, but you know what isn't. In the meantime, I need a tunnel. I need to get the rest of the tunnel built in order that I can get the floors put in the back. And actually, we're doing all this so we can get back towards the front of the car, right? So each one of these pieces, one piece joins to another piece, joins to another piece. So thanks for coming along for this trip. We'll see what we get done this weekend. I'm probably not going to do as much stop motion as I've done in the past because just kind of getting tired of it. You just let the cameras run forever, and it's sort of a bit whatever, right? So I'll talk ourselves through some of this as I do some of the sheet metal, and maybe we'll both learn something in this episode. Anyway, let's get to work. Okay, so the plasma comes out, and the last remnants of the tunnel are going to leave us here just in 2 seconds. Now this tunnel has to come out. I've got the seat in there because I'm just doing some looking at stuff. I usually tape this off with a bit of tape and try to run it, but I tried to use a guide to make it all neat because I thought maybe I might use this part of the tunnel actually when I cut it out. This is just the start of Saturday morning, right? So by the time it's 2 hours from now, I'm hacking the rest of this out. Anyways, good start. Plasma makes things go fast, but you have to think real carefully before you actually go cutting. You can see the two-piece drive shaft that's in there as well. So I had that two-piecer in, and that's not actually sitting at any of the angles. It's sitting out of the way so I don't plasma cut it. But yeah, it was not going to work in this particular application. So I've got to get an extra inch worth of height out of the back seat cross members. This is the scary part because we're going to take all of that apart. Now, my rear suspension actually attaches into that cross member, so I'm pretty cautious about it. It needs to be quite strong in the end, just for safety. So here we go. It should be the last little bit here just to hack that on. So before we get going too far on hacking things apart, then I've added a cross member just with some scrap box section steel here that I've got lying around the garage. So I get that tacked in. So this will hold the car together, I hope. It did, but it'll hold the car together while you cut it apart. Don't forget the plasma makes this a terrible thing. You can make bad decisions so fast with that tool, it's not even funny. So I've got this piece tacked in now. I just toss a couple of tacks in her, and it's actually just about ready to come out now. So I'm getting ready to get rid of it and get the floors put in there. If the floors were in, I don't think I'd be as worried, but no floors means I'm a bit worried. All right, so here we are. Tacked it all up. do use this really crappy orange tape that I have, mostly because I bought a bunch of it, and I really hate it. So it's not particularly good tape. It was cheap. But I use it just to mask off areas, to use as a sort of quickie guide when I've got the plasma out. So it's also good just for looking at stuff to get high contrast tape. Now, if it would only stay together, right, it's getting a bit old, so it's getting kind of crappy. All right, plasma's out again. In for a penny, in for a pound, right? Oh, away it goes. Boy, it sure doesn't take long. So that's just the back piece. Now, the angle of the tunnel would have allowed me... Well, I think the shaft would come pretty close to this area here. So this is going to give me better than a finger width worth of clearance over the top of the drive shaft. Again, with independent rear suspension, doesn't matter. The drive shaft doesn't move. I just want to have clearance. This is underneath the seat. Nothing else goes in here. So no big deal. Just make the clearance you need. Get that done. Alright, so the last time you saw these parts, they were in the car. And now they're out of the car. Again, that plasma... I'm not even going to reshoot that. That plasma cutter makes quick work of this stuff. So these pieces just come apart really quickly. You can kind of see how they were built. They're a typical sheet metal style construction pieces. Sort of an interesting bit of automotive archaeology to see the little tabs and how this stuff was put together. And anyway, that's the part of the back seat. I remember toiling over that a couple episodes ago, and then I cut it out with a plasma cutter. Oops! I always knew it had to go. And that's the last remnant here of the original tunnel, and that's what we're going to be getting after today. So let's have a look inside the car real quickly. Actually, it might help if I put some lights on inside the car. Let's just switch the lights on. Okay, so here we are inside the car. You can now see we've got that brace welded in across here because we took this cross member out, so that was where those other parts just came from. And this is what we're left with. So we now have really good access down towards the differential, which is sitting back here. And of course the other end of that has to connect over here in a single straight-ish line, which is what that little piece of wood trim is all about. So the piece of wood trim gives me an idea of the angle, which for those that are counting angles, 4.6 degrees is the angle. That's magic, and that'll tell me where it is. So what it did, in effect, was it put the transmission, the top of it, if I just use that as a brace, so the old part that was the hoop bit right in here, there was 1 inch there. I needed 1 inch. So now what I'm going to do is just pop that whole area up. So I'm just going to pop this area up over here, right? And I'll have to replace the material on the inside and make sure I have enough room. The old tunnel actually is really tight up here at the front end. Sorry, that's the front end there, correct? So the front end here was really tight, and the back end, the tunnel, is fairly generous. So we're not going to have to add a lot to the width. We're just going to have to add a little to the height, but I don't want to lose any on the strength. This also tapered in, as you saw before. It's sort of nicely wasted. There, we're going to take that and just make it straight, and then just have our little pent roof over that. So we'll get working on that this morning. First up, we're going to brace the insides of these two halves. Again, this is a cross member, structural member. My suspension, as you can see, my rear suspension connects right onto it. So I don't mind beefing this up a little bit. It's 2 inches wide exactly. That's actually a piece of 2-inch bar. It sits on it perfectly. So I have to be a little smaller than that. So I'm going to build some pieces for the inside that go in, right out. And they'll cap this off this way and this way. I'm then going to take a piece of 3-inch, because this is 2 inches wide, so 3-inch gives me a 1/2-inch flange on either side, and I'll put that piece of 3-inch all the way around to give me a flange both for going forward and a flange to attach the sheet metal to going backwards. So that's the current engineering plan to get myself 1 inch. That's all we need on this entire job. So that's going to be work for, well, probably the weekend. I'm going to say today, but you know how things go. If you just tuned in, by the way, I'll tell you a time, and it's never right. It's my one superpower, actually, is the ability to underestimate time dramatically. Let's get to work.
It's time to get the back seat area measured up. Again, I only put this in with tape, so it's just a rough cut. I knew I had lots of room. Again, we're doing all the fabricating here, so we can kind of do whatever we like. But at this point, I got to get the tape measure out and get some actual distances knocked in here. So a couple of quick measurements just to make sure we know where things are going to be, and we should be getting ready then to trim this up a little bit more with a little bit more care now that the center area is mostly hacked out. With those measurements done, it's now time to get the sheet metal math going again. So I know I've got a 1/4 inch radius on my my brake, the little brake, not the big brake. So I do up the math. I'm using 16 gauge sheet metal here, so I can't remember how thick that is, but about 1/16 of an inch. So I've got all the measurements and all the calculations done up in my little workbook there. Then I'm selecting which side. Actually, I've trimmed these with my shear. I just make a little dot, so I'm always referencing the same side. And then I use my calipers because the measurements come out at weird units, and I'm not going to put a ruler in there. I don't want these to be wrong. Every time I've done this technique, people, with the bend radiuses and the setbacks and all the calculations, the parts just fit together like sheet metal should fit together. So I'm pretty I know it seems like it's a little bit overly retentive or something, but I never have to remake these parts, and they're always perfect right when they come right out of the brake. So I'm not being boastful. That's just the science working for you. This works great. So I take the extra few seconds that's needed to do this, the quick calculations, scribe the lines, press the parts, and I'm not making them twice. They're made once, done right. So that's a fantastic technique. now that I've got the pieces pressed out, I'm going to add the angle at the top. It's a 4-degree angle actually, that back cross piece. I just described on 4 degrees. I'm chopping those things off with the wheel of death, trying to make sure that I still end up with the same number of fingers I started with. I still hate those things. Alright, back at the press with the 1-inch die that I built a few episodes ago to allow me to press a 1-inch radius. In this case, it's the middle of the part. I don't want it completely flat. I just want a little bit of a peak through the middle. Across the back seat, I just think that's going to look better. So I'm just referencing the center here, and then I just put it in until it's on the tangent of that round die. Give it a little push. Not exactly sure how much, doesn't really matter. It is whatever it is, right? Search around for a way to look around this. I should probably clean my bench off, eh? What a mess. Good heavens. I keep saying I'm going to clean my bench off, but I don't know where I put all the stuff. Alright, so just getting it lined up, being as anal as I am, and we'll get this part pressed out pretty quick.
Got the major fabrication done. I just ground the mill scale again. I left it on the inside. Don't really care about the inside. We'll just paint that. Ground the mill scale off the outside and hit it with that zinc weld through primer. We'll be spotting the spots again. It's sort of just a quick test if you want to see what welding on the mill scale is like versus not welding it. Doesn't really matter if you're using MIG or TIG. It's just so much easier if it's not there. As soon as you've got clean metal, you're going to get a good ground and everything is going to be great. So there we go. So that's been all cleaned off, ready to go. I capped the bottom, okay, and then I've compensated for that reverse angle. Okay, that's sitting in at this kind of angle here, and then I've got the bottom that's level and sitting where the floor pan actually closes that panel off. Next to that is going to go the hoop that we made. So we'll just press that hoop out. Worked out really nicely again. I put a little kink in the top, just wanted a little bit of shape. So those are going to weld well to the middle of those, like that. And then I'm going to fold that bottom 2-inch in. Probably I'll do it before the floor pans go in, but so we'll get it all put together properly. So that's going to be the new tunnel part. And then the sheet metal is going to weld to that, and then I have to construct a piece that goes over the top. So with that being said, I now have to go back into the car and punch the holes. Again, I prefer punching them to drilling them. Just leaves a nice clean hole on the inside. I don't have to coat the inside of that frame member. It's already been coated at the factory, so that's going to work out really well. All right, let's get to work. Okay, so here's that part. The holes are all punched. We've got them punched in a pattern front and back. I've cleaned up the outside of that so that the angles are all nice and proper, what I want them to be. You can see it goes basically straight back into the tunnel there. And that 1/4-inch rod, the wire, we're going to use that to create a bit of a template to come forward. But that back piece should be relatively easy to do. Famous last words, right? So I'm going to just get these parts tacked in here real quick. And we're going to start building some more sheet metal. Hey, that's always fun.
Okay, so now that hoop part is going in, I've got 5 spot welds on either side, and remembering that this is going to be attached with the sheet metal towards the back and the sheet metal towards the front. It's not going to need any more than that in order to hold it in place. Oh, as well as the C-pans on the bottom. I mean, it's a fully encapsulated part, so 5 spot welds each side. Get those blasted in through there. Those are real nice to work out. Just a little tapping around to get that in and perfect. Sheet metal time. Just using the fake cheap Chinese knockoff Beverly shear that I've turned out. It works pretty well actually at the end. To get this, this is 18 gauge and it's a half a sheet here, so it's a little hard to wrestle it around. In fact, my press is in the way, so I got to go shove that out of the way. Gorilla man here and get that out of the way. We'll get that blank cut out. Really, again, I watch guys on YouTube all the time that are doing sheet metal work, and they're cutting pieces apart with grinders and other things, and I just think, wow, just go get yourself a shear. Like these shears, they aren't expensive. I think I paid maybe $200 for this one on sale, and 18 gauge like butter, right? Just choppity chop right through there, no problem at all. Nice straight cuts. You can be really accurate with it. You don't have to work with the wheel of death. You don't have to worry about sparks flying and hitting stuff, and it's nice and quiet. You can just chop and chomp away at it, and it just disappears. You can cut any shape you want. It's throatless, so you can turn corners pretty sharply, and it just does a lovely job actually. So I'm super happy with this thing. So I'm just knocking back some of these corners. Sometimes that shear just leaves a little lift up at the end there. Just get it all straightened out. Then I'm going to be cleaning it off with some wax and grease remover. I oil my sheets when I buy them. So I buy the sheets from a local sheet metal company, and they come in raw. There's probably a little bit of light oil on them when they have them, but I know they're going to sit in my garage for years before I get around to using them all. So I take a little bit of 3-in-1 oil and oil up my sheets so that I'm not working with rusty metal. I try and make nice parts in the cars. That's all cleaned off. Now we're going to lay out the pattern that we need to cut out the trans tunnel back sheet metal piece. So I've left that blank a little bit large, just because that's a smart idea. You can always trim a little bit off, but if you need a little bit more, that's always a bad thing. So I'm usually leave it long kind of guy. So now we're trimming it to size. Then you can see the big pie cuts. Now if I had a tree stump or something, I guess I could probably do these really deep shrinks, but I'm not that adventurous, and I probably should learn how or get the equipment to do it, which is the tree stump and a big hammer. I'm not always convinced that that's the easiest or fastest way to work sheet metal. Sometimes if I just cut it and put a bend in it, so I'm going to cut it right where I am going to have bends on either side of the piece. I find that actually welds together quite nicely with very little distortion. You can't really tell that I've welded it together when I'm done. So it's just a little easier to do, I guess. So that's the way I've always done it. But purists in the sheet metal shaping world would be horrified here that I'm actually using the shear to cut this when I could just shrink it to shape it properly, but. Oh well, live and learn. More skills to acquire, right? I have to learn how to do that at some point. So these little parts, they don't bend as effectively in the brake as I would like, so I've got a couple of pieces of channel iron that actually, those are the old frame rails from way back in the day, that are the frame rail upright parts. So I just use those with my urethane mallet to hammer over very quickly hammer over. This is going to be the weld flange for these particular parts. Again, it doesn't take very long. It's just a few seconds. You don't want to move it all in one blow. You just want to carefully go back and forward. And I don't care if it's 90 degrees at that point, because I know that at the end result, I'm not actually going to need it 90. I'm probably going to need to bend it to something else. So there's the bends made. Okay, the fun's about to start, so I don't mind talking over this because it's just a lot of banging. So I'm setting the angle here on a big T-dolly. So that's got about the right radius that I want to put in that panel. I'm not too sure how much of it I need, but I know I need to get a good initial crease on it. So I just get it lined up with where I want it and then give it a good couple of whacks to just set the angle. And then I'll continue to work that around as I develop the part. So I'm going to just start rolling that over. Boy, it looks like I'm concentrating harder than I am. So I kept that piece that I cut off with the plasma, and I'm just comparing the radii there. So trying to make sure I've got the bends about in the right place. It will make the forming of it when I get it into the car quite a bit easier. So just knocking this part around on the T-dolly here, and we'll get this all formed up. It didn't actually take all that long. The whole process was pretty time efficient anyways. The thinking to get it done is another thing entirely. I wish my brain worked faster.
Alright people, you can always put a bend wherever you want it. Sheet metal. It will bend to your will. As you know what you're trying to do with it.
So I'm just doing a little hand manipulation here to get the parts folded in and together. I've got curves actually on both the tail parts and the other part, so I'm getting happy at this point.
Able to weld it up. It's not bad.
Alright, so with the fit's really nice, we just tap and tack it together and then do those little stringers that I've talked about in the past and get it all welded up. Just grinding the welds off now. This is a technique that I really like, is just using the edge of the grinding wheel to grind the weld off. So, and then I switch over to sanding. So as soon as I get the basic form right with the grinder, then I switch over to the sanding discs, a couple of different grits, and get that all polished up. So we're just about finished. Just tap down that flange, and it's almost ready to go in the car.
Well, there we have it. I'm going to wrap the episode here, actually, just so I don't start getting behind in episodes and things again. Anyway, there's the part fitted in that you just saw me build. Pretty happy with the overall. I mean, it fits really very, very good. I did have to give it a little bit of taper in here just to make sure it fit the body a bit better. There you can see that finished part. And there you can see how those spot welds went in there. These ones here, very happy with all of those. Everything is working out nicely there. And you see the fit down is pretty good. It'll need to be tapped around just a bit when it goes in, but hey, that fits up nice. Ow. And then you can kind of stare down the tunnel, and any of those air gaps are just a matter of pulling sheet metal around a little bit to get it to fit right. So overall, pretty pleased with that. That was a lot of work. It's a whole day shot. I guess it's not shot. One more piece of the puzzle is now finished. So up next, we're going to build the riser to connect the two sides here, just to give this a little bit of extra strength. Remember, I've got an entire suspension running on that. And then we'll get going and building a tunnel from here to there. All right, thanks again for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. Tell your friends. It could be fun. All right, see you next time.